Welcome to the STEM Confidence Podcast, where we talk about how to turn your data into powerful insights. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the STEM Confidence Podcast. Today, we are going to talk about a topic that is very dear to my heart, which is how to successfully manage a project from start to finish without procrastination and overwhelm. I'm sure that you've been at the point where you are assigned a project and you ask yourself, where the heck do I even start from? Especially if you've just started a new position or if you are straight out of university. The only thing that I can say is that it is a very frustrating point to be at. Not knowing how to start and how to reach your project objective can easily bring to overwhelm, which eventually brings to inaction and procrastination. And if you add perfectionism to the equation, you obtain a pretty messy situation that is, at least from my own experience, quite challenging to untangle. By now, I believe we all heard that procrastination has nothing to do with laziness. It is rather a reaction to overwhelm and perfectionism, which are then preventing you from actually taking action. Of course, procrastination and overwhelm are not field-specific and could be happening in any area of our life, no matter the job we're doing. However, unlike some other fields, STEM work often involves complex problem-solving, very specific and meticulous research, and some technical tasks that demand sustained focus for a long period of time. This complexity can sometimes make it much harder to even start a project, let alone execute it efficiently and finish it in time. And that is why procrastination and overwhelm in the STEM fields might seem even more debilitating. So in this episode, we are going to talk about some causes and consequences of procrastination. And I will share some tips that I learned from working with clients and also from my own experience. So once we are in front of a task that is unknown to us, the first feeling we feel is overwhelm. This is a completely natural reaction to not having a clear and actionable task in mind. We usually realize that our project is so broad that we struggle to commit to a starting point. Everything feels equally important and urgent. So the first tip that I could give you to successfully start managing your project is to prioritize your workload. To prioritize your workload means to find the minimum effort action that will move you towards the completion of your project. So, how to choose the minimum effort action? The only requirement is that it has to be as clear and as unambiguous as possible. So it should not be a to-do list sounding something like figure this out or understand this and that. This is way too generic, and making a vague to-do list probably won't help ease your mind. Instead, it should be an action that produces a direct result. The essential criteria for choosing a minimum effort action are that it moves you forward and that it provides a sense of accomplishment. In the STEM world, the minimum effort action could sound something like this. Make a list of papers or articles to read about a specific research question. If you're coding, it might be understand how a specific function from a specific library works. Or it could be writing 100 words in the methods section of your manuscript. Remember that our brain doesn't like uncertainty, so it is much easier to be given direct and specific actions and then execute them. The second tip that I have is that clarity always comes from doing. Even though we would like to have it all clear and well-defined from the start of the project, it is extremely difficult to have all the steps figured out from the beginning. Figuring out a path that brings us to completing a project usually involves many trials and errors, and even some dead ends. It is through these experiences that you discover not only what doesn't work, but most importantly, what does. So once you've completed and achieved your minimum effort action, you need to keep moving by defining another minimum effort action that brings you closer to completing your project. Remember that in the journey to conquer procrastination, persistence and consistent actions are the key. You have to keep moving, no matter how small the steps may seem. And watch as your vision becomes a little bit clearer and your project starts taking shape. After some iterations of the process, you will find that you are slowly but surely defining a direction and moving along it. And by doing so, you will also gain confidence, because you will inevitably learn more about the topic you're studying. And then, you will be able to define even more complex actions that will bring even more value to finishing the project. Therefore, remind your perfectionist mind that it is not necessary to have it all figured out from the beginning. Clarity comes as you go. And the third and final advice is to aim for excellence instead of perfection. It is extremely easy to let perfectionism sneak in and get caught in the narrative that everything you do is never enough. I'm sure you've heard many times that done is better than perfect, but what does one do when nothing less than perfect ever feels done? What usually helps when this happens is to have a measure of how done something is. This could be measured by, for example, how much you've learned since you started. Some years ago, I learned to differentiate the aim for excellence and the aim for perfection. Perfectionism usually comes from fear of failure, while excellence is an intrinsic need for something to be done well. Excellence is also much more tolerant, and it comes from self-care instead of self-doubt. It allows for imperfections and mistakes by putting more emphasis in the process. It usually helps to ask yourself, how much did I learn by doing this? And believe me, that is incredibly liberating, knowing that you're allowed to produce imperfect action. And finally, remember that managing projects can be very challenging. So it is important to find a way that works for you and that allows you to maintain focus and, more importantly, enjoy the process. So the next time you feel stuck, remember that you don't have to have it all figured out from the beginning. Actually, it is very unlikely that you will. Clarity comes from attempting, and attempting necessarily brings some dead ends. Try to find that minimum effort action that can bring you to the next step, and remind yourself that striving for excellence doesn't necessarily come from being a perfectionist. Thank you for listening, and until next time. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you are ready to elevate your communication skills and transform your data into valuable insights, schedule a free discovery call on the link in the description.